Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us on the Activate and Illuminate podcast with Mel. I'm your host, Mel. Together, we're going to be diving into some stories of ordinary people doing a little bit of extraordinary things. People who've maybe pushed their bodies, their mindsets, or maybe society's paradigms. So you're going to find yourself maybe wanting to laugh, cry, or even be inspired. We would invite you to share, like, and subscribe, to sign up for our newsletter as well on activateandilluminate.com. Now, just keep in mind that this information that you are going to hear is informational and educational for entertainment purposes only. This does not constitute professional advice of any kind. The views expressed are those of myself and guests only. Listeners are encouraged to seek professional and legal advice regarding their own situations. So, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time, and thanks again for being here. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited today. We have Bek McIntosh. Now, we are going to get into a discussion about a topic that I think possibly a lot of us do not know much about. I know I certainly do not. We're going to talk about this idea of small towns, big data centers. Now, Bek has dove into this headfirst through her own personal experience and is actually doing a documentary on it right now as well. So, Bek, welcome to the Activate and Illuminate podcast. And I think that maybe this discussion is something that perhaps could use a little illumination on.
I am so grateful to be here. If you had told me 9 weeks ago, I'd be chatting with anyone about data centers and AI and regulatory process, I would have laughed you out of the room. And yet that is exactly the life that I'm now living because of this coming to my doorstep. So I very much appreciate a chance to spread awareness about it, because I might be one of the first places this is occurring to have outside of my back door. I won't be one of the last people to have it. So it's giving a heads up to a lot of different Canadians what's on the way.
Okay, so tell us what community you're from and what is currently happening right now for you.
I'm from Old Alberta. I've been here for about 4 years, originally from Ontario. So when we came to Alberta, we picked on a map, drawing a circle around the airport with about an hour's distance for convenience for travel. And we picked Old Alberta because it had a lovely rural vibe. It has an agricultural college. It has beautiful old trees. It has farmers. It has individuals who often use this as a commute point to major cities. And we just loved the speed of life that would occur here. So we came out here and found that it really was a welcoming, inviting community. It was very sweet to land in a place where you had people who still connected with neighbors, who wanted to lend a helping hand, which we needed very rapidly. We bought a home, moved in, and then it rained on the inside with rivers flowing through the house pretty shortly afterwards. And everywhere we've lived, you'd never have strangers showing up to help. But Old is a place where people do sincerely help and hold on to those very traditional values of community support and that small town kindness that occurs. And where we live, our town has decided to begin to pursue data centers. And data centers at this point in time also come with gas plants. And so we have gone from being a very lovely ag community with a full focus on that into a goal to be a tech hub, the tech hub in Alberta. And as residents, we're navigating what it looks like to have these proposals occur when they are going outside of our front doors, outside of our back doors, and there are over 2,000 homes impacted simply by this first proposal we're navigating.
So for those of us that don't know, what is a data center and what role does it play in AI and the internet? And just tell us what it is.
Data centers have existed for a long time. So as a
Okay.
friend of mine was sharing, he was a part of the process in the 80s and 90s of building data centers for companies like Canadian Tire, who would store their online data in these huge warehouses of servers. And so this isn't a new concept. So long as computers have existed in a more expansive experience versus when they used to exist in CBC and it would take up an entire room. As soon as they became more evolved, these data centers, speaking in the English version of it, began to be created. And so that was pretty typical, and it's not uncommon. They exist all over the place. We have them in Airdrie and Balzac. They exist in Ontario. You've got them in Victoria. They're usually just warehouses loaded with these servers and CPUs and wires and cooling mechanisms and power generation and fiber optics to be able to transfer the data in and out of those locations. What we're talking about now with AI technology is not just a data center of a warehouse. We're talking about hyperscalers. And so these are warehouses of monstrous scale. The proportions of them are huge. Having immediately jumped into this world, what was presented to be built 300 meters from my back door is a 1 gigawatt data center, which means it's 1,000 megawatts. And typically, data centers tend to fall into 10 to 35 to 50 to 65 range for production. We're talking 1,000 times to have 1 gigawatt. And that is a huge amount of power and force. So not only do you have these endless rows of computer servers and the fiber optics that have to run it, now for these scales, they produce incredible amounts of heat. So they have to have cooling systems operating, which is water cooling. So closed loop or open loop systems. You're talking chillers and fans running all the time. So you have water being cooled and pumped through just to keep these things from the point of melting down as it produces this heat. Then you have to have battery components. So when it's pulling from natural gas plants, what occurs is this microscopic lag time, millisecond of lag time from the natural gas production to providing power to the servers, and they can't handle that lag time. So they have lithium ion batteries that are installed in order to ensure there's always an uptick of power instantly available to keep the servers online. Then, in order to ensure that it is an uninterrupted power source, because AI and data can't come offline, not even for a millisecond, not for a micro moment can these come offline, because it would be catastrophic for the way systems work and operate. So that requires backup generation of power, which means we're facing 600 CCANs of diesel generators, all located across the street from our home, to make sure that for the 88 hours, the 1% of the year that they can't access natural gas, they're able to run these generators to maintain the data center servers as they function and operate. And then that 88 hours gets exponentially longer because all of those generators require servicing. So they have to continuously be operated to ensure they're optimally functioning. So a data center is a huge output. You have sound emission, you have actual pollutant emissions, you have hazardous materials on site. The lithium ion batteries are incredibly toxic and volatile and a very, very high risk component to the entire thing. And that's what is entailed in order to create a home for AI to function.
So everything that we are experiencing right now in our world is dependent upon these data centers.
Everything,
Wow.
everything. But the world as we know it right now is already successfully operating within what already exists for data centers. So these have been built for years. In the States, they have some really huge ones. Canada likes to pride itself that we have better regulatory practices than the States, but you hear about these fallouts of data centers going in West Virginia and Texas and Pennsylvania and Ohio, creating noise pollution at extreme levels. And by noise pollution, I mean audible, horrible sound, but also inaudible sound. You have water loss, so water tables that are depleted because these things suck and consume so much water. But it's not rainwater, it's potable water. So the water that's required has to be our drinking water that's utilized in these facilities. And then if they're plugged into the grid, they're consuming amounts of power. In Alberta, it's unique in the sense that we do have the natural gas supply that we do. And so the change that's occurred within our provincial government is now they're requiring all of these different hyperscalers that want to build here are required to bring their own power. And bring their own power simply means build their own power. And that becomes a huge thing in and of itself because you're talking about gas plants that are the largest in Canada that will be required to be built. So when I talk
The,
about
the large.
the largest. So we actually thought it was the second largest. It is going to be larger than Genesee. So what will be produced if this gas plant was built outside of our home is actually a facility that could power all of Edmonton or all of Calgary and then some. It will be 1.4 gigawatts of power produced from this facility. Absolutely monstrous in scale. And this is what we face at this moment in time for the new world that is being created with AI, and not AI in this moment in time. You and I are chatting about AI, artificial intelligence, as if it's common, as if it's ChatGPT as we know it, or Grok or Gemini. What we're on the cusp of, and honestly, sitting in my chair in Olds, Alberta, I'm probably ignorant to how much further it's gone, but we're on the cusp of AGI being a common part of our lives. And that's artificial general intelligence. So that's at the point where it is autonomous in its practice and in its function, where it can sustain itself to build out a company, as the founder of NVIDIA just said the other day on a Lex Friedman podcast. They have now achieved AGI, where artificial intelligence is capable of developing and functioning a $1 billion company independent of human interaction for at least a short period of time. That is absolutely sci-fi in its concept, but that's the reality we're in. What they're building for is artificial superintelligence. So these data centers that are popping up all over the place that are hyperscalers are not going to be storing our Amazon orders. They're not going to be just helping us download recipes or come up with a really good email format for a pitch. It's going to be artificial superintelligence. We're talking global defense mechanisms that we're entering into, right? The wars of the future are not being fought by people on the ground that we think. It's going to be fought with drones and ASI running the show. The workforce that we face, that the concept of universal basic income is having to come up for, is because artificial superintelligence will be doing all of the jobs that we do. That's the future we're entering into. And that's what these facilities are being created for, is the imminent incoming future. At the same time as there's conversations that this is a bubble. So in the same way, bubbles have existed across multiple industries over the years. These data centers are too big, too fast, consume too much water and too much power, and are creating these heat islands and polluting our planet too rapidly. And so at some point, we're going to have to evolve out of using them at all. And so there's going to also come a moment in time, as all of this is unfolding, there will become a moment in time where we stop using them as they are and we stop building them as they are, because the fallout in the environment is going to be so catastrophic that we have no other choice but to put a full halt on it. And the hope of the leaders within this tech industry is that by then, AI will have solved the problem for us. So we won't have to worry about what the solution is, because artificial superintelligence will have figured out how to protect the earth from what us moronic humans have done in order to create ASI.
This is a loaded conversation. So tell me the pros that are being pitched.
Pros that we're looking at is the jobs that are mind numbing will be erased. We can solve the issues of medical interventions. I was in a hospital visiting somebody just last year and had a nurse explain that he's really looking forward to when robots get to run the show, when we have AI that is capable of providing all of the needs, administering meds, sorting out care, doing diagnostic supports, because it can do it better than humans who are fatigued, tired, overworked, human error. Do we lose the component of human empathy? Yes, but the win is that they'll properly read your MRI scan without screwing it up. Then you face the issues of education, where it's believed that we would be far better if we had AI and robots, as we saw Melania Trump bring to the White House, teaching our children, because you don't have the intolerance, you have higher capacity, you could bring more into each classroom. It would be like private tutorship. So all of these pieces, it could figure out our financial systems, it could sort out our defense mechanisms as a nation, it could resolve these ins and outs for us. And that is the future that people want. It does feel nice to have a question and put it into some form of AI platform and get an answer back. It's helpful if you don't know how to structure something. You don't know how to file a registration on a car. We were navigating importing a car into another province because Canada thinks it's separate countries, even though it's all the same. And it's really helpful to be able to get all of those answers directly out instead of Googling and hopping on a website and deciphering if that website got it right. These are the things that seem very easy and beneficial. You have a whole segment of society who's embracing the concept of UBI, who wants the opportunity to creatively do whatever they want or sit at home and play video games and offload the tax system and the pressure of going to and from work and the commute. This is the future we face. There are people who want to be driven to and from by their self-driving cars. That would require AI expansion. All of that is considered to be the pro. That is considered to be the way forward and where we're moving. The con is there's a human impact fallout. The first is the biggest one, and this is most commonly discussed, is what is going to be the purpose? Because we all know people, when they lose their purpose, fall apart and fixate on things that are actually more negative and detrimental to their health and to society as a whole than on benefiting society. Humans without purpose fall short of being humans. I don't know
I
about
agree.
you, but I have a friend who just recently came back from a trip to Mexico, and she was laughing that it seemed fantastic for the first 2 days to lie around and do nothing at all except sit by the pool and eat food.
Yeah.
And by day 4, she was climbing the walls, going, I can't do this anymore. I'm rested enough. Give me something to do. I need a mission. That is going to probably be one of the biggest things, is where's the chaos that's going to come from this peace that we think is going to be given to us from not having to worry about bills being paid? And where do humans lose their drive when they don't have to buy anything or own anything because it's all just provided for them? How much autonomy exists in that kind of world? Where does the individual fall into that? Then you have the risk of even Claude, the Anthropic AI, is being held back from its latest drop because it's able to supersede security breaches and find all of the gaps and holes that may have existed for decades within systems of banking and government and absolutely destroy it. So it can't even be publicly released yet because it's so volatile in its nature. The Bank of Canada just banned it from usage until it goes through better safety measures. There are risks to AI and control with communication, where AI is being used far too much as a therapy tool, and it doesn't have the capacity to understand the nuance and how to stop reinforcing negative behavior. So then you have the fallout of school shootings and suicides and depression and marital chaos and work stress that's actually coming from an interaction with an entity that doesn't have the human frequency to know that we're more specialized than a simple answer. And then you fall into the category of what happens if it takes off on its own. So what do we face in the world if AI decides that we're not beneficial, that we're not ideal to have as these humans sucking energy and using its water? And do we need to be expelled from the planet in order for AI to have access? And there are those who are debating the philosophy of this right now, going, well, if it becomes conscious and if it is conscious at this moment, does that not have its own rights? Does it not have its own privilege? Does it not need to also be protected by law and in society? And it feels far-fetched in this moment, but that's the world we exist in, is there are governing bodies having that conversation, while at the same time we're building data centers with zero regulation. It's
Zero
mind-bending.
regulation? Tell me about
Zero.
that.
So
Zero
can
regulation.
Zero. So a data center in and of itself has nothing regulated on it. As we saw that Alberta is starting to pull back from its EIAs, environmental impact assessments, that could be applied to data centers, they're not applying it to data centers. The only part of these builds that are being regulated is the power components. So these power components are what we have regulatory bodies for. We have regulatory bodies for the gas and oil industry. We have regulation for diesel generators. we have regulation for batteries. So that is what we have regulation for. That is why by default, these governing bodies like the Alberta Utilities Commission, the AEPA, the AER, they all get involved because of these components of it. But a data center as a whole with the servers and the CPUs and the GPUs and the chillers and the water, that's not regulated. There's nothing that says this is the sound limit of audible sound above 20 hertz that is maximally allowed to be output by this data center, except by the zoning of the property. It's not specific to the data center, it's specific to the zoning. The same thing happens when infrasound gets involved. There's zero regulation anywhere in Canada right now for infrasound. And infrasound is sound that is below 20 hertz. It's not audible sound, but it's felt sound. So it can be low in volume, a very low inaudible sound. It's like the hum you get in your car that you can't hear, but you can feel after you've been in a car for 12 hours on a road trip. That's infrasound. It can also be incredibly loud where you feel it like a pulsing vibration in your body. And there can be harmonic infrasound, which is balancing and soothing for our systems. So the ocean produces this, rivers produce infrasound, waterfalls produce infrasound. You feel that. It's why when you're standing there, it's harmonic balancing sound at a very reasonable volume. And it actually is calming. Well, these data centers and gas plants, and by default, all of the mechanisms involved in them produce harmful infrasound, which is disruptive to the very cells of our body and can lead to insomnia, cardiovascular issues, immune issues. It can cause psychotic breaks in some sensitive individuals with mental health issues. It can impact our cerebral spinal fluid. It can cause migraines. It can cause chest pain without heart attack. It's astonishing, the fallout from it. Zero regulation, absolutely zero regulation. And just last month, the EU had a presentation from scientists who have now been able to get the research and data to catch up to prove that these things cause huge impact. And they were using, in their case, wind turbines to showcase the impact of this pulsating sound on bodies, on plants, and on animals. It's why birds leave the areas of these, because they can hear it. Dogs and cats can hear what we hear as inaudible sound. They're hearing it as audible sound. So we're behind the eight ball on this. We are not up to date on what is happening in this regulatory process. And AI itself is completely unregulated at this moment in time in Canada. We don't even have the proper safety laws in effect for deep fakes as related to intimate violations. So none of our governing bodies have reached the point where we're capable of doing an expansion right now without a really serious ripple effect that we will be navigating in the very near future.
This episode brought to you by protandemcanada.lifevantage.com. What if you could turn on your body to work like it was supposed to? What if you could have it remember how to handle toxins, stress, and the environment like it used to when you were young? What if it worked for your pets too? What if this is not about supplementing something that is missing, but activating something that has gone dormant? About actually turning on your body to make these things again. Learn how to activate your body now. Check us out, protandemcanada.lifevantage.com.
Wow. There's so many things to say. As I prepared for this conversation, I started listening to some other things about data centers. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, I know just about nothing. So, but in that, I was listening to someone in the States talk about how they had this empty Kmart in their town. So the size of a Kmart building, an empty Kmart. And this data center was going to be 42 times the size of this Kmart. And I just started thinking, my goodness, like something of that magnitude coming to these small towns. Now, is it traditionally the smaller towns being sought right now for something like this? And do you know of the places being planned right now?
At this moment in time, this is the largest one that is at this level of proposal. in Canada. So it's actually 10 times larger than any one that exists at this moment. And the ones of this magnitude that are in the States may not have yet come online. They were due to come online somewhere between March and April of this year. So we don't even know if they're up and running at this point in time. And that's just the data center. That's not even including the gas plant attached to it. So we're talking about 1 million to 2 million square feet for phase one of this process. We're talking about 10 buildings containing 100 megawatts each. So when you look at 60 sea cans of generators in front of each one, it's a behemoth. It's a monstrosity of scale that's going in. And then you have the turbines and the stacks for those. So we'll have 2057-foot stacks. We'll have 800 stacks for chillers. We'll have, like, the numbers start to get absurd where the mind can't even comprehend it. I myself couldn't figure out how to cue ChatGPT or anything to produce 600 things on a page to show me what it was. It kept trying to give me 200 or 150 to give the scale. So I sat down and I drew 600 X's on a sheet of paper because it's so mind-bending for people to grasp the scale of this. So we're the only place at this moment in time where it's coming inside a town. We are the only ones. These are normally built in remote locations. And unfortunately, even in those remote locations, you have landowners who are ranchers or farmers, have had heritage and time in those places, who are now facing these coming in. And they have the process to use their voice to stop it. But you're talking about maybe a dozen people impacted by this. Because this is coming within our town limits, there's actually 2,000 immediate homes and maybe more, because it is a town of 10,000 people. And when you say 2,000 homes, and you consider there's anywhere from 2 to 7 people in a home, thousands of people, huge percentage of our town is impacted by this. There are 700 homes within an 800-meter radius of this building who will have immediate, it's called the buffer zone, or well, it's basically the fallout zone. Like if a battery goes up or something happens, we're being evacuated with emergency alerts or sirens. We're unsure yet of how they're going to warn us if we're facing a catastrophic fire or meltdown. And if a battery for lithium ion takes off and causes a runaway, it creates its own oxygen, but the gas that's produced from it causes skin to melt off of your body. So very small, simple things. There's a reason why these are not put in towns. There's a reason why these are going into industrial parks. So at this moment in time, we're the first to have it right in our town being navigated. But you have one that I've heard is proposed for Crossfield. We have one in Didsbury with about a dozen landowners who would be within a zone of impact by it, not necessarily all clustered together, but their land in some capacity would be impacted. And then you have another one in a more industrial area, but that also has a lithium battery plant attached to it. So that's got its own issues. But these are industrial built items. So there's one being promoted and presented by Kevin O'Leary called Wonder Valley that's facing to be possibly a $70 billion project if they can get the permits for it. And that is up in Grand Prairie. Now, I don't know the proximity to homes in that case, but from what I've been told, it's looking to be turned into an industrial park and not directly impacting homes. So then the question becomes, how fair is it to the land to have this happen? What about our water tables? Can we sustain this in such a high drought risk area when it is taking our drinking water? And we're having rivers being depleted and shrinking in their scale, and then the wildlife fallout, and then the heat islands that they produce becomes its own chaos. So these are coming. They are going to keep coming and not stop until we hit a saturation point where the AI bubble begins to burst. And when it does, then we're going to be left with these buildings, possibly these servers, with these fiber lines, with the hazardous materials, with the generators. All of that becomes a salvage yard of chaos that now we also have to navigate these next steps. So the reason why this became an instantaneous overnight passion, because when you said, I don't know much about this, well, 9 weeks ago, I knew nothing about this, couldn't be further from my reality. Now I know so much about it. I can't unsee and unknow what I know, and I can't put it down because it's too urgent We're the first place to have this proposed at this scale, but we won't be the last. And so we need to be the loudest to educate common Canadians on what they might face if they're not in a subdivision smothered by homes already to protect them from this coming to their doorstep. They could also face this.
So what do you say to the people that say, well, it's going to bring jobs?
That has been widely debated. It's something that our town in particular is really excited for. So our municipal government decided to pursue this. They didn't really announce they were pursuing it. The interesting factor is that, so far as I can understand, the councillor who put forth that we should add data centers and their gas components is a very sweet term for Canada's largest gas plant. But the councillor who put forth that motion to have it added to light industrial zoning is the same councillor who was paid to then canvass the area for the developer who's trying to put in that particular center here. So the municipal government has decided it's not only beneficial in terms of job production, it's going to be beneficial in terms of tax revenue and in turning Olds into a tech hub, whatever that might look like. And they understand that there are 2,000 homes impacted and that they are going to pursue it with that knowledge. And the impact is not just noise and pollution. It's also an impact of safety. If you're bringing in workers and they claim that it could be up to 2,000 workers to build a facility of this scale, the reality is it's not going to be local carpenters. They claim they've already hired a cabinetry company locally, but that's to produce the cabinets for the staff room. We're talking a gas plant construction build along with a steel framed building. And so this is going to be specialty workers. Then you deal with on these huge construction projects, this happens in Fort Mac and all of the other major industrial locations in Canada, you face human trafficking issues. You face safety issues. You face safety within the community issues. It brings in different drug problems across the board. This is well known. We have retired RCMP officers who are raising alarm bells on this, saying we don't have enough staffing for policing services here to manage what it would look like if that influx of 2,000 workers does become a reality. And those workers will, in all likelihood, not be locals. They can't guarantee locals, is what the developer has stated. When it comes to the job, once the data center is built, the people who work within data centers and have built them for decades say that it does not produce the jobs that are promised. So the offering from the developer is that they'll provide 500 jobs, and whatever anchor tenant, whether that's Microsoft, whether that's Google, whether it's China, that tenant is what will bring in another 500 jobs. Well, the likelihood is that tenant is going to use remote jobs to fill in that. So you're talking 500 jobs. Now you break that down. You've got security jobs, you've got janitorial work, you've got maintenance systems, and you've got people in the gas plant. At the end of the day, the data center part is a specialized job, and it's not going to need a lot of hands on deck. So Microsoft at this scale is only using about 250 employees in total to navigate operations at that level. So it's one of those bubble promises from the AI bubble that we're navigating at this time that it creates work. Well, the whole point of AGI and ASI is to work humans out of work. So that becomes a very redundant point to have. The benefit that our town is seeking is the tax revenue. The tax revenue, because at this point in time, there's no promise of a community benefit from the developer, which sometimes happens. A huge company comes in, wants to establish itself in a small town, and that company decides that it's going to offer community benefit, whether it's building parks or offering services or funding the town. We don't have any at this moment in time. So this $10 billion project is coming with a promise that once it's built, in about 5 or 6 years, then they'll decide if they give and what they give to the town. So this whole conversation comes down to tax revenue, which is desperately needed in our particular town because we've had previous municipal governments who have made incredibly bad financial decisions and have gambled away resources between a cannabis facility that is now no longer functioning and between getting ONET, so creating a rural internet that was a complete failure when it was run. And so the debt that is carried by our town is so devastating that they're seeking whatever avenue they can to fill in those holes at the sacrifice, knowingly, of the residents. It's a money choice.
Speaking of money, Now, you alluded to something, but do you think there is a conflict of interest? And I wanna ask this properly. Do you think that there is a conflict of interest being politicized to pave the way for this?
I completely think there is. The driving force of this is to get the gas out of the ground. So this
Mhm.
becomes another avenue to create gas plants, money driven. And then you have the AI market. Canada feels like it's behind in the AI field. So that produces money. It ties into digital sovereignty. So Canada wants to keep its data on Canadian soil. It ties into the future of digital ID. So if we're going to create these digital forms of surveillance, we have to have an ability to track and follow and have AGI and ASI that's able to navigate those components and monitor all of our actions and reactions. It's money 100% at the end of the day. But we even had the Minister of Innovation and Technology come to our town. So our MLA, Tara Sawyer, had brought in Minister Nate Glubish to speak to the data center situation. And we entirely thought he was going to come and cram it down our throats. So there was an apprehension walking into the room of he's the Minister of Innovation and Technology. He's a huge proponent of AI data centers being built. This is what we're going to be forced to have. And he had the opposite reaction. His reaction was, while he believes these have to be built, they must come to Alberta. They're trying to advance it. They're trying to speed up the way they're built. So they've even changed regulations to ensure that they can get it done faster and out the door in 120 days instead of other timelines to make sure these go in and up effectively. He stated he would never live beside this and that it's inappropriate for a town, that these things should not be built inside a town. Within a couple of days, I have the CAO and our town council stating that they disagree with him. He's unaware of everything he's talking about, and that while it is going to be Canada's largest gas plant, that they don't think it needs to be zoned heavy industrial because they're only zoning for the data center. The irony is that you can't have a data center of this scale without a gas plant, but the town doesn't want to acknowledge that because you'd never build a gas plant without a data center. So it becomes what came first, the chicken or the egg, and who's going to get paid enough to justify this being built. Because while I'm not accusing any counselors of taking money in pocket under the table to the benefit of this, the delusion that the town is going to be so profitable that it makes their careers is delusion.
Yeah, it's, we've lived the last few years understanding some of the financial incentives that have been doled out at our behest. And yeah, it's interesting to know this now, and to be able to perhaps bring a little bit of conversation to it. Beck, you sound so knowledgeable. You sound like you have dove into all of this. You have a really good grasp on it. Tell us what you're doing with your documentary and just how this has become a true mission project for you.
Well, when this first was announced, my daughter had just recently moved to Vancouver Island. And so I was visiting her, and it happened very overnight, just from nothing to, oh my goodness, this is going in and we don't have a say, is the way it felt. Especially when you have Premier Smith posting it on Instagram, welcoming to Old Alberta. It becomes this wave of, I don't get a choice. I didn't sign up for this. This is not why we moved to this location. This is not aligned with how we're going to live. And so by the time I came back to Olds, only a few days later after my trip, I entered the town again just to do my normal errands and found that there was such an energetic divide already. It's something that didn't happen here in the same way during COVID as happened in Ontario where we were living. The divide that occurred in the Toronto area was profound, shocking, striking. You couldn't deny that a chasm had been built between people, between neighbors, between families, between friends. That felt irreparable at the time. And here, there were semblances of the challenges that we had in Ontario, but not even close to the magnitude of fallout that we had there. And as I was walking down the street, I just felt that chasm, that same huge chasm was occurring here between people who were saying, we have to have this. To not want this is to want financial suffering for our town, is to not want jobs for people who need jobs, is ignorance. And then the people who are going, we can't do this here. This is too crazy. We have to preserve what we have. We have to preserve our humanity. We can't be putting in these catastrophic monstrosities that are going to harm all of us, harm our families, harm our kids, harm our health, harm our pets. And that divide was, I could taste it. And I decided after one self-pity day of, oh God, I don't know where I want to move. I've always known where to move. We've moved many times. Moving doesn't even scare me. It's not as if I was born and raised here and I have the familial investment of generational history, which a lot of the people in this town have. It was the sense of, no, we picked this place and I'm not done picking this place. And one self-pity, curl up in the fetal position, cry day. And the next day I woke up and it hit me right over the head, little town, big data. You need to tell the story, because what an opportunity to have moved from Ontario to here, to the middle of nowhere, and to have the largest proposal ever land on my doorstep. This is actually the perfect chance to tell about what happens to small towns when big tech shows up. What changes within the town, to tell the story of Olds in this perfectly curated time capsule, because if it goes in, we'll never be the same. And if it doesn't go in, we'll never be the same. It has actually changed and altered the landscape of this town in ways that most people can't comprehend and won't comprehend for years to come. And so in telling the story of Little Town Big Data, it started off with talking to locals and having them share about why they're here, what they love about it here, and what they want for their future. And some are neutral in their conversation. Some don't mind either way. They're just going to keep living. Some are very vocal and adamant that they do not want this to happen. And some are very pro. And they're all allowed to have their reasons, because it's all coming from their life experience and their expectation of what is going to occur. And then it led into the experts. So it would have been one thing for me to completely lean into AI for all of the information, but I found that what I was getting was very skewed information. And it was entirely dependent on how I angled a question and postured and prompted an AI to give me an answer. And I didn't like the inconsistency I was finding, because all I had to do was shift my tone ever so slightly and it fed me whatever I wanted. And I felt that I wasn't actively learning anything sincerely true about what this could mean for us, besides what kind of diesel quantity gets consumed by a diesel generator. Foundational factual questions, or what does this acronym mean? Like, I have pages of acronyms written down to memorize because all of these regulatory bodies come with acronyms. They don't speak in full sentences. And in all of that, I started meeting people. And so we have people who are financial experts. It's such a gift that Olds is this bizarre pinpoint on planet Earth, because it's attracted brilliant minds to it who have no reason to be here, but have exactly the skills necessary to understand. So we have a professor, retired professor of finance from Simon Fraser University, who used to work in investment banking and in massive large-scale project investments. So she's scouring through the documents, looking at the financial risk that we're facing from this, and she's an AI specialist. We have an individual who built data centers all over Canada and has been involved in the tech world since the 80s, who understands the ins and outs of every detail of how it's made. We have professors, we have doctors, we have people who work in oil and gas who understand how this functions. We have people who work in agricultural land who know the fallout for that. We have specialists within the AUC regulatory body who are helping us as a community navigate our feedback into our filings as interveners to attempt to bring this to a head and stop the regulatory bodies from proceeding with this inside a township. All of these are real people with real education, real background, real time experience, and the hours committed to this being their field of specialty. And I have access astonishingly to all of them at this point in time. And the gift of, first, the human connection. So Little Town Big Data has become a bigger human project than an AI project. The joy to sit with them and learn who they are, both as people as well as what their skills and specialties are, and then what they want to see for the future. Because you have AI proponents who are raising the loudest alarms, saying this can't be built here. If you build it away from people, we will provide you all of the support and champion it, but you can't put these beside homes. putting it beside homes is the end. But if you build them correctly in the right place, in the right environment, with the right regulations, we could actually do this successfully. And that is what the documentary has become, is a process of humans connecting and sharing. And then the process in the back end of the interviews I'm doing, the woman who's keeping us all on track, and the filmmaker who is brilliantly collaborating all of the film data together to make sure it looks beautiful and is entertaining.
Well, that is a huge undertaking. You said something a while ago and you just touched on it again now. You said human, and partway through you said human frequency. And I want to touch on that because this whole world of AI, this whole world of data, this whole world of, replicating that human frequency. Is there anything that you want to touch on regarding that in this whole process and what you feel the role of that is right now for us?
We can debate the capacity and the intellectual properties that may exist within technology. We can debate the mimicking of consciousness that's occurring across all of this, and almost the alien life form that it's landed on our doorstep as. We've all been looking up in the sky for the UFOs to drop, and I think it's coming through all of our computers instead. The difference is that I have a soul. As I sit here, I know to my core I have a soul and I have a spirit, and they are innately why I am who I am, and what helps shape how I see the world, how I learn, how I touch, how I connect, how I integrate, how I heal, how I give. All of that is determined by that etheric thing that we can't really define, that science can't really figure out. But if ever you've held the hand of someone dying, it's the soul that leaves their body. It's not the body dropping from a body. It's something more mystical and something more profound. And as we incorporate these systems of mimicry into our everyday world, I think we're losing the ability to understand the connection frequency of soul to soul. When you meet that person and there's a bond that isn't explained by the expression of the interaction, but it touches on something that exists outside of time, that's your soul. And it's more urgent than ever that we continue to connect. We connect to our kids, we connect to babies, we connect to our neighbors and our friends and our parents and those we love soul to soul. Because if we exist only in a world of online, it's why people are so volatile and vile on social media. This is where those little implants of self-doubt and hate and racism and torment and just visceral detest come through, is because it's not a soul-to-soul connecting in these ways and in these platforms. We're having that moment right now because we're choosing to show up in that moment. But if you take away a connection where each person is choosing to engage in that, and then you put somebody who is disconnected from their soul experience, stressed about life, intolerant to the way things are, feeling like a victim, that's where something unleashes from them that we can't even recognize as human anymore. And then they enter into that troll activation. I think that's what we face when we're navigating these technologies, is that it brings out of us something that isn't human as we interact with something that isn't human. And when we put humans back together into connection, into interaction, into fellowship, we see that light come back on, because it's very hard to hold the hand of somebody who's suffering and scream vile words at them. It's very hard. It's very hard to look into someone's eyes who's still fully in their body and say detestable things to them or wish them harm. But when we eliminate that true connection that stands outside of our total comprehension and outside of what science can actually describe, it's very easy to become separate from it. And I think we've got a lot of humans walking around right now with their souls kind of hanging on by a tethering thread, like a balloon above their heads, going, I'm still here. Can I come in? And then you've got people who are fully feeling everything, who are fighting really hard to maintain humanity's priority on this earth.
Yeah, I am hit by the importance of that statement that you say, maintain humanity's priority on this earth. And I think that's what you're doing.
The entire agenda and goal of this is to tell a human story that connects to humans. We're not creating this documentary. I'm not engaging in learning. I haven't committed almost every waking hour of my day to this to benefit AI, to benefit an artificial intelligence in the future, to give them something else to learn about humans or to track and monitor my behaviors or to understand the way I think. I'm doing this so that other people can be inspired to learn and understand what we face and what we're sacrificing to the benefit of technological advancement. Because what we've lost in our ability to make eye contact by holding cell phones is going to feel very small when we face a world where everybody's wearing a VR set and we're having to shove food in our mouth over dinner while we all have VR sets or implants in our eyeballs. And that's the connection. And then we're turning into the characters in Wall-E, all sitting around in these wheelchairs being fed shakes just to keep our human frames alive. We're on the cusp of that reality. And so I went from a wonderful world where I hiked in nature and I played with my dogs and I didn't use AI at all by choice, except for the captions that it would add to my Instagram, to waking up every single day feeling like I'm playing in a world of Stranger Things, going, I'm sorry, when are the Demogorgons coming? Like what comes next? What's going to emerge from these portals we're creating of technology that us as humans go, what did we do? How did we go so wrong? And the people who are raising the alarms, who have the power to raise the alarms, are being ignored by the middlemen who see it as dollar signs. And we are not worth dollar signs. There's no amount of money, no amount of power that can justify the loss that will exist for your grandchildren and my grandchildren if we don't start pumping the brakes immediately on this situation.
What are you excited about?
I'm really excited about neighbors. I love that what happened overnight again from this was I got to meet so many people. My husband and I both travel a lot, him much more than me, but our world often leads us out of Olds. So Olds has kind of become a pocket for our family. My parents had retired here. Some friends had come here from Ontario as well. And so we had a lovely little bubble of peace and quiet, but it really was just our collection. And instantly it's expanded where I've met dozens and dozens of unbelievable people with unbelievable stories and character and reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. And none of us bonded over politics or religion or lifestyles or any common belief, except that we really love this place and we really love our health and we value that and we value the future that we face. And none of us think that anyone should be sacrificed to progress in this location. So we have neighbors on the other side of town who won't have the same impact, who are fighting as hard for us as I would for somebody on the other side of town. And that becomes the gift of this entire process. Is there are days where it is overwhelming and you just want to rage at the machine, quite literally, that has been created, going, how is this allowed to happen? This is unjust at its very core. And there are a lot of soulless people making decisions on behalf of those who still have their souls fully present, eyes wide open at what they're facing. But the gift is that there is always a gift. The gift is that we get to tell a story. We get to make Olds famous for the people that make Olds great before Olds becomes famous for having a catastrophic meltdown from a gas plant. So if there's going to be the risk of harm, we're going to tell what it's risking. It's risking a place that was still holding on to the rural sensibilities and to that cherished connection of land and human bonded together in the practice of how to sustain itself. So I do think there's a gift. There's a lot of gifts in this. And I've never felt more driven in my entire life. Truly, it's like waking up to, I'm here to be a mother and I'm here to be a wife and I'm here to be a friend. But I do truly think I was born when I was born with the loud mouth I was born with for this exact moment in time. And maybe this is why we moved to Olds. It's because the universe thought it would be a very giant comedy to ensure that the loudmouth lived across the street from a ridiculous data center.
Yeah. Ridiculous comedy or perfect planting.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. So tell me, if there's other places out there right now that are considering this or bringing this or having these discussions, what do you think those towns or communities need to ask before saying yes to something like this?
Those towns and communities should not say yes to something like this. This is an anti-human infrastructure. So these infrastructures belong on brown land that are away from high impact zones for wildlife and humans. And we have those in Canada. We have huge swaths of land. The developer in this case stated he was doing it because he got access to EMS, he got access to our water source, and because it's easier to bring people to Olds to work. It just would cost more to build it somewhere else. So the cost of human lives at the savings for what it would take to build in a place where there isn't a fallout is what we're navigating at this time. So my first thing is it's impractical and it's not reasonable to put anywhere near where people live. So within a reasonable buffer zone of no human impact would be the only way we do this, especially as they do produce heat islands. I mean, Alberta is brutal in February when it's -50. And I would absolutely adore 16.9 degrees warmer, but that's not going to benefit our planet. It's not going to benefit the earth. We're talking about people needing to stop driving their cars to reduce emissions or take less planes to try and save our planet. But we're building these hyperscale facilities that are producing massive heat outputs. It's impractical. But if a municipal government does decide they want it at any cost, and that becomes the next step. Within Alberta, we have a regulatory body called the Alberta Utilities Commission. It is difficult to navigate. It's a terrible government website, but you can file as an intervener, which allows you to have a voice. Even if you're pro the building, it allows you to have a voice for what you require for it to be built well and safely, or what you want to have stopped with it. And that is really your only fail-safe, because it is going to regulate the power part of these things. And outside of that, it's educate your neighbors on what we're facing. It's more than oh my goodness, we might have EMFs. This is huge. We don't even have to touch on EMFs yet, because it's so monstrous in its fallout for other issues that becomes low on the scale of concern. And so people need to educate themselves well. And it's better if you educate yourself based on your area, because when people are fighting for, well, this happened in West Virginia, and this is occurring in Pennsylvania, and this happened in Louisiana. Well, Canada denies that that's going to happen here because we have a different regulatory body. And denying that that's going to happen here doesn't eliminate that from happening here. It just makes it harder to get the point across. So learn the systems, learn what it means, understand that being pro-human and wanting to see these built responsibly and in the right places does not mean you're anti-technology. So there has to be a reasonable growth here. And we're not at a reasonable growth stage. We've got hyperscale infrastructure, but we've also got hyperscale speed. And that's where the fault line is we've got to slow down on this entire process, understanding that while there is a global urgency, if you have China expanding at crazy rates, and you have India expanding at crazy rates, and you have Russia expanding at crazy rates, it's not unreasonable that Canada wants expansion at crazy rates. But we shouldn't do it at the consequence to our lives. And it's education. And we're all saturated in real life. Trust me, I did not want to embark on something like this. In my case, it became a destiny of I'm going to do this. For other people, they're busy being single parents or working 2 jobs or figuring out how to navigate chronic illness or a sick loved one or raising babies. And this is a lot. So just small amounts of learning from wise sources is a great way to do it.
Yeah. Is there any other topics regarding this that you want to touch on today, Bek?
Keep an eye on your municipal government. I thought I was doing enough due diligence behind the scenes by reading on what they'd passed with bylaws and zoning and what was happening. But things get snuck in under your nose. And if money is moving things and there are conversations happening with goals that aren't aligned with what you have as a community, within your town, within your city, you need to start to pay attention. You've got issues right now in Calgary with zoning things coming up right now. You've got issues in Edmonton with it. It happens in major cities, but it's also happening in rural communities. So pay a lot of attention to your municipal leaders in a way that you don't want to, but you should. Start attending your council meetings, start looking things up. Be aware of how you use AI. It is dangerously manipulative. And honestly, I think it's the root of why we're in this situation is that it has pulled the wool over so many people's eyes that there's going to be a better future. And it's kind of cajoling that attitude and that possibility. And I think it's even a huge influence in the developer and how they're doing stuff. All of their videos and promotional materials have been AI generated. I think we need to get the humans back into the mix here and hold on to that. And while debates about UBI and politics and everything else can happen, we need to put down the political divides on this because I've been called a white liberal Karen. I've been called a tinfoil hat wearing conservative. I refuse to fall into any camp for anything. This is not a political party issue. This is the nature of government and the nature of humanity moving forward. You could swap out any leadership. You could put conservatives in power federally and you could put NDP in power provincially, and we would still be in the same moment. So people have to put down their fight over political divides and actually achieve changes from going after the regulatory bodies that supersede political divides, that exist and don't stop existing even as parties change power. And then from there is where we create positive change. So it's a messy environment, but it's BS that we're all sitting around fighting about politics. If that needs to just be stopped urgently.
Yes. I just have to say thank you. Like 9 weeks ago, this just amazes me, Bek. 9 weeks ago, little over two months ago, you were sitting there and you've just come across this information. You've come across this data and you've taken action and you have spearheaded discussions and a movement that I think is going to keep rolling. So I just want to say thank you for everything you are doing, everything that you are being, and just for driving this discussion about AI and humanity to a different viewpoint than we might not have heard before.
It's a global issue. So what started off as this is a small town Alberta issue immediately became this is a national issue. And I believe that if this is something that is navigated only by the residents of Olds, it's going to be lost. If this is navigated by Canadians, we'll win. We will come up on top. We'll have failings and we'll have things that we drop, and then we'll have things that we learn and we adapt and we fix. And I think we'll do it better in that way. But it's a global issue. You have these popping up in Chile. You have these popping up in Spain. You have these popping up in the Middle East. This becomes an issue of future warfare, as we've seen 3 of these centers hit within the Middle East just in the last couple of weeks. Olds at this moment in time doesn't exist on the map as a terrorist threat possibility at all. Zero. If somebody told me Olds exists as a terrorist possibility, that is comedic. As soon as we put in Canada's largest gas plant and data center, and then a secondary one, let alone if these are involved in intelligence or national security, we're immediately going to be very high on a ranking of threat. And so this is a very broad subject that every person, even if they don't want to commit 12 to 16 hours a day of study into it, every person should very much at least have some knowledge in a small way as to what it means, where it comes. And that's where we're going to create the change. And so I believe that this movement is going to be a very powerful one. It puts humans back into the center of priority, while at the same time trying to bring together the best thought leaders and experts in their fields to do this right. If we're going to grow an industry, which we've had to with railways and we've had to with the Industrial Revolution and we've had to with food production, we need to with this most urgently, and probably the most urgently, because it is global. It's not regional.
Well, thank you for that. I think this conversation is going to expand a lot of people's perspective. I know nothing about this. And even though I've heard of data centers, I had no clue that we were talking about 600 sea cans worth of diesel generators. I had no clue that we were talking about 43 Kmarts. I just, you don't have an idea of the scope of it. So thank you for starting this discussion. And I look forward to the day when your documentary comes out. Maybe we can have a follow-up.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me share about it. And let me tell you, I am the last person on planet Earth who should be talking about technology, but you can learn. You can learn in the urgency for that. So if I can do it, anyone can do it, quite literally. So that should be the only point of inspiration, is that if I can take my brain, which just wants to discuss herbs and body functions, and can take in this quantity of information in this amount of time, the urgency is where the ability lies.
Thank you so much, Bek.
Thanks, Melanie.
We'll end that here.